Hello, everybody, and welcome. So my name's Marnie, and I'd like to welcome you to Frankston City Libraries with our FrankTALK with best-selling author Kirsty Manning. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Frankston City Libraries operates, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. I would like to extend that respect to the elders of other communities who may be joining us today. So welcome, Kirsty. I must admit, I am halfway through The Lost Jewels. So Kirsty's latest novel is The Lost Jewels, and so far I am absolutely loving it. I can't wait to hear the future stories of Essie as it comes about, and I'm just up to the bit where Kate and Marcus have just headed to India. So, so please take it away.
Well, this book started about 3 years ago when I was researching my former book, The Jade Lily. And as you've probably heard with other writers when they've spoken here before, one of the best things you can do in the middle of a book that you are currently writing is research for the book, research random ideas, shiny new ideas that pop up in the middle when you're in the murky middle of a manuscript. So I was researching something and I stumbled across a newspaper article that was a review of the Cheapside Hoard at the Museum of London that had been held a few years ago, and it was extraordinary. It charted the story of some workmen in 1912 that were on a site in Cheapside, London. And Cheapside, London is about a block behind St Paul's Cathedral, if you place it in London. And they were there and they dug up over 500 pieces of Elizabethan and Tudor jewellery. Literally, their pickaxes hit the ground and they dug out of the ground clumps of soil that were dripping with strands of pearls and bags of turquoise and diamond solitaire rings and gold necklaces with enamel and botanical paintings, pomanders, which were like little vessels and vials that they wore around the neck filled with oil. And I will get back to those, why they're important. Buttons with rubies and diamonds and sapphires and opals, and also Byzantine jewelry, a Byzantine pendant, and also jewelry from Colombia, so emeralds from Colombia. There was a watch, one of the most extraordinary pieces of jewelry I've seen in my life, an emerald watch the size of a baby's fist with gold clasps that flips open with a Swiss watch inside. So it's an emerald watch that you flip open. It's just an extraordinary timepiece, and it kind of, historians have been able to date the jewellery roughly to the time it was buried around the mid-1600s. And the mid-1600s in London was a time of great civil unrest. There was a civil war in England. There was also the plague, and there was also the Great Fire of London. And what struck me as I looked through this article was, who would bury a bucket of jewels, 500 pieces of jewelry? Who would bury a piece of jewelry, for one, just one single piece, a ring, and never return? But who would bury 500 pieces, a treasure, and never return? And this question really sat with me while I finished The Jade Lily. And I just turned it over in my head, because historians don't know. It's all hearsay who the navvies were that dug up that gold, because of course they dug it up and we don't know actually if they found all the jewelry or if they just found some of it, because you can imagine some of it was pocketed and given to loved ones or their betrothed. It was to find a piece of jewelry, even one piece of jewelry, let alone 500 pieces. I mean, it's life-changing, you can imagine, for many of those people who worked and lived in quite Dickensian conditions in 1912 London. So my story is an imagined story between the facts, and is the story of Essie, a young woman on the cusp of womanhood, 18 who is looking after her younger sisters, and she goes to visit her brother, her older brother, who is working on that work site, and she was there the day those jewels were discovered. And Essie's only wish, really, she works as a seamstress in a factory in London, and her only wish really is to keep her family in school, to keep her younger sisters, sorry, in school, so that they can have more opportunity than she has in life. She's she's quite selfless, and like many women who want to keep the family together, she is looking for opportunity and a better future for the ones she loves. And then there's a story of Kate, who is a modern day jewelry historian in Boston, who is sent to London on a commission to uncover the search for the Cheapside Hoard. So there's going to be an exhibition of the Cheapside Hoard. They're in storage in the Museum of London. And she is asked to go there by a magazine editor to uncover the secret of the Cheapside Hoard, which is fun because, of course, no academic has been able to solve that. And then there's a third storyline running through the book, which is I wanted to show the passage of jewels from origin through to museum. So it is a story of a particular jewel from the moment that the gemstone is dug out of the ground through to how it possibly ended up in the museum. And that is pure fiction based on, extensive research. And I wanted my point in writing this book, I mean, it was threefold, but it's quite extraordinary to me that, it's easy to dismiss jewelry as quite frivolous, but the passage of jewels through history and also geographically really is the tale of globalization, of colonization, of the movement of wealth through expanding empires, really. And I wanted to show the passage of those jewels from their origin through the silk routes over the seas, and just how every time, because jewelry is highly transportable, but if you think back to the 17th century, it was incredibly valuable. It's like currency. So a bag of rubies, a bag of diamonds, a bag of spinels, Colombian emeralds, they were the representative of paradise, the green, and they were just so valuable, so precious. And so the movement of jewels through countries really tells you it's an exchange of wealth and it's an exchange of power. And I wanted to capture that every time a jewel is passed through somebody's hand, it really changes somebody's life. And as well as the historical and economic aspects of jewelry, I wanted to show really jewelry is always about sentiment and love. And I wanted to show the hand craftedness of jewelry, I guess, if you like, the workmanship and the masterpiece process of how you get to be a master of a craft, and how you get the inevitable masterpiece, and just the thoughtful process of design and years of workmanship and craftsmanship that went into it. So there's Kate, who goes to London Museum, and then there's Essie in 1912. In 1912, Edwardian London, you think, is an extraordinary time of wealth. It is, but we know as readers that in 1912, the suffragettes were marching in the street, and they were marching for votes for women. And I wanted in this book to give voice to a woman whose voice has not been recorded in history, because often the lower classes and women's voices have not been recorded. They were not in positions of power, and we really haven't seen a lot of their stories in the history books or in fiction, but it's becoming more common now in fiction, of course, thankfully. And so I wanted to give voice to her and kind of show just how, show the lines of suffragette and what that could mean. But also there's that sense of foreboding, because of course we know that there's a world war on the horizon, and London, while it is fabulously wealthy, it is a very much a case of haves and have-nots. Essie and her family live in, they're poor Irish immigrants. They live in the ghettos, the back streets of London in, as I said, quite Dickensian conditions, while streetlights and lamplights and London was kind of exploding, motor cars and women in French heels and silk were marching in the streets around them. So I wanted to kind of capture that era. And you know, it's funny, 3 years ago when I started writing this book, I had no idea it's a book that covers the Great Fire and the plague. And I had no idea that in 2020 that we would have had in Australia the worst bushfires we've ever seen, and followed up by this virus that finds me doing a book tour on my bedroom floor, and all of us educating our children at home or staying at home and away from loved ones, and worrying about family and friends who are far away. And I think what it has taught me, and why I feel strangely comforted at this moment. People have asked me, they've said that I have seemed quite calm during this time, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. I think that could be the gin, the wine in the evening, my morning walk. I don't know. I can't give the answer to that, but what I do take comfort in is the lessons of history. So I think that you know, history has shown us that people in times of emergency, like Samuel Pepys, you know, during the Great Fire, we're all mocking people for putting away, storing toilet paper and hoarding pasta. But, you know, Samuel Pepys at the time of the Great Fire, he buried his cheese in the backyard and came back to find it. And I guess what these moments have shown me in history, and I write about London almost as a character of the book, is that this too shall pass, and there is strength in community, and cities and communities rebuild, and they rebuild themselves differently, and they are stronger, and they are more adaptable and more resilient. And I guess history also shows us how to cope with that period of trauma and grief and move through that, because humans are eternally optimistic and adaptable, and we adapt and change, and we are hopeful. So while we're in the midst of this awful moment, and certainly, you know, we've been very fortunate, I think, in Australia mostly. I mean, obviously there has been some sadness, but not what we've seen unraveling overseas. But you know, those countries and those families and those people are going to have to find a way, like Jewellery, to reset and reshape themselves and keep going, and they will, because they have every time. We do it after war, we do it after plague. And so this is a book about how you can be malleable like Jewellery, and how you can reset and reshape your life, and the eternal optimism of humans. So that is one of my key themes in the book. And one of the questions that people often ask me is about my research for the book. So I when I discovered the Cheapside Hoard, I researched everything on the internet at first about the Cheapside Hoard, and if you Google it, you'll actually or go to London Museum, you'll actually be able to see a lot of photographs of the actual pieces of jewellery, which are just, you know, so exquisite. And what I love about jewellery, especially at the moment, because I think we're all kind of reading a bit more and looking at beautiful artwork and looking online. I'm certainly looking online at art galleries and museums just to kind of feed the brain a bit. And what a beautiful piece of jewelry is, it's a message and a gift, especially crafted piece of jewelry. It's about love, it's about loyalty. To give someone a ring or a brooch, it's about love and loyalty and devotion, and it can be passed on to the next generation. So what does it mean every time a piece of jewelry moves through our hand? And you know, certainly people who've inherited jewelry from family, it's very precious to them. They'll say, oh, this was my grandmother's, or these were my grandfather's cufflinks that I had made into earrings, or this was a diamond brooch of my grandmother's that I still wear, or I've had made into a ring. You know, it passes through the generations, and each time they make it their own. So it's very precious. So back to the research, I then went to the Cartier exhibition, and I'm not sure if anyone here saw it, but it was, they had a lot of sketches of bespoke jewelry, and how showed the process of everything from faceting the gemstones to the design of a necklace. And these necklaces that Grace Kelly and you know, the Queen and people, most of us in our lives, we will never, that will be as close as I get to a 32 strand diamond necklace in my life. I will never wear, well, maybe, we never know. We never know, but chances are I will never wear a diamond and emerald necklace that literally drips down my torso. But to see it, and you know, these necklaces take 2 years to make, 3 years to make in some circumstances, and to see it, it really is the very pinnacle of human endeavor. It's like that, an extraordinary feat of imagination and craftsmanship. And you see the glitter, and it's not just pretty, it's actually magical. It is actually something quite moving to see the gemstones and the jewels glittering like that. So and at the Cartier exhibition, they had a workshop, sample workshop set up with the anvil and the tiny, tiny jewels, tools that they use for carving into jewels and cutting diamonds. And so I got a sense of what a workman's or workperson's workshop looked like. So I was able, and that has really remained unchanged. The basic tools used in forging jewelry haven't changed since the 1700s. So I was able to imagine a workman's, I guess, office or studio where they crafted the jewels. So that was quite special for me. And then I went to London, and I did walking tours through London. So I started at Wren's monument, which features in the book, which has a beautiful frieze of London personified as a woman, and she's really on her knees, and she has God and charity and the god of money and all of these kind of men in lots of torsos in battle gear kind of urging her to get on her feet again. And of course London does, and she thrives, and it's just an extraordinary monument by Wren. And I sort of did the Great Fire of London tour, and I did the plague tour, which is where you can see the plague pits and kind of see how it moved through. And you can really get a sense of the 1600s in London, because some of the buildings are still there, overlaid. Like, London is such a city of layers, and I try to construct London as a character in my book. So I did various, and I did a suffragette walking tour, and I also did a suffragette walking tour in the East End, so I could get a sense of just what the issues were for women. Because Essie, my 1912 character, of course, she does not have the time to march in the street for votes for women. She's all for it, of course. I mean, but she's a bit tired, she's a bit busy. She's got to get food on the table and get these kids to school. So, but what I wanted to capture in Essie was that universal thing that women do. They're really the emotional ballast of any family. And while I think sometimes women's stories can be relegated, or women's fiction can be relegated to women's fiction, I think that's really can be sometimes quite demoralizing, because I think women's stories are no smaller and no less heroic, because we follow the line of Essie's story, because of course Kate, my contemporary character, is Essie's great-granddaughter. So she is an educated woman who has been to university, and she has a PhD, and she is a living embodiment of everything that Essie worked so hard for. So, and as I am, and many of us are today, we have our lifestyle thanks to the women who worked so hard to make it possible for us to finish school and take it for granted that we would go to university if we wanted to, or do whatever we wanted to. We have that choice now. And so I wanted to capture a bit of that. So I'm just thinking, are there some questions you would like to?
Yes, well, if anyone does have any questions for Kirsty, there's a little chat button down the bottom of your screen, so you can actually pop that question into the chat. But you've given us a little bit of insight into your writing style already, in that you were already researching your next novel while finishing the Jade Lily. How do you write? Are you a planner? I mean, obviously with the research you have that element, but do you tend to plan out a novel, or are you a bit of what they call a pantser and just fly by the seat of your pants and have the book evolve as you go?
I have a very clear idea at the beginning and I have a very clear idea at the end, and both can change, both tic-tac around a lot, and then in the middle it is a pantser. But the more research I do and the more I write, I kind of get a clear idea. But certainly when I sit down to write each day, I have a clear idea of the chapter I'm going to write, and I just break it down piece by piece, and eventually there'll be a couple of pieces and I'm not quite sure how information will be revealed, or there's enough of a twist or a red herring. And I find sometimes I'll write towards the end, you get very specific, you know your characters well and you know your story really well, so you're very efficient. So I probably, I write, people talk about drafts, but I don't even know what a draft is, because I kind of write right up to when my book is due, but I might have gone over some chapters 30 times and other chapters just kind of fall together in one piece. So right at the end. So it's an evolving feast. I wish I go to writers' festivals and I'm on panels and I listen to writers talk about how they do it all the time. And I'm always very inspired by other writers, and I always wish I had a very cohesive answer, because the truth is that I really want to be a plotter who plots out every step of the way. But I find that there is, especially because I write in multiple time frames, there's something to be said for trusting the process a little and letting your imagination fly and just seeing what comes out when you sit down at the keyboard. I don't like to do that too often though. I'm on deadline at the moment, so I'm doing that a bit in the middle. But I'm kind of tic-tacking my back way from the back and from the front, and hopefully they'll marry up in the middle, and that's a bit of a mystery. But I feel like if it's a mystery to me, then it'll be a mystery to the readers. So it's good in that way. So
Absolutely.
It is a genuine mystery.
I have so many writers that do join us on these author talks. And quite often they say to me, listening to somebody else's story who is where they want to be, that as a published author, it's really reassuring to know that everyone has a different way of going about it, and there's not a particular style that should be followed.
Look, I wish there was. I so wish there was. It would make the whole process a lot easier. And I did a writing course actually, and I kept on sending through these spreadsheets of plots. And it was actually the tutor who said, loosen up. I think you actually need to write, because actually the fear of plotting can really stymie your writing. But I think if you have a very clear idea of where you're heading and what you do, like I know some writers sit down and they are complete pantsers and they have no idea how the story is going to unfold. Like I'm certainly not one of those.
Yeah. I must say, I'm a bit of I have an idea and then I'll let it evolve and I'll let it change as I go. Now, you're a journalist by trade, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't just make that up.
Well, I worked in book publishing and then I did freelance journalism. So
awesome. And I must say that, I guess, experience in writing must have set you in good stead for researching something like Cheapside.
It did. And I think what you get from being a journalist is that you are very comfortable ringing up people and asking for information, because you know that people are very happy generally to talk about what they do, because often they're not asked about that a lot in life. And so it's lovely to kind of unpick somebody's story and career, and people are very helpful. The other thing is that in journalism you write features and you have to capture a person very succinctly, so you have to get to the essence of a person and bring it onto the page for someone and describe them and make that person alive and vivid and real, and so that is good experience. And also I used to do a lot of travel writing, and what you do with travel writing is you make a place come through, so it really, a sense of place is very, very important.
Absolutely. Now,
So
Virginia's just commented that she agrees that one of the most interesting aspects of the author talks is the multitude of different approaches that the authors take, and all of their works are so individual, which possibly reflects their personal style. One common theme that I think must be important is the act of writing every day.
yes, writing is crucial. I mean, it's the verb, isn't it? You've got to do it. Can't be a writer if you don't do it. So I think that discipline, it is, and I think most writers, I mean, I can't speak universally for all writers, of course, but I think most writers will tell you quietly, even if not publicly, that sometimes what first appears on the page really doesn't meet their expectations. It's not, you imagine the copy in your text when it pours from your fingers is going to be magnificent, and sometimes it's not. And so I have a word count early on in the piece, and I have my early chapters, and I go over them over and over again, and I have a set kind of word limit that I like to write, but I've kind of thrown all that out the window at the moment, because now I just want to get a book finished, and it will be the length that it will be now. But certainly I find that if you write every day, you get better. It's like training for a marathon or swimming laps or anything. That process that you kind of sit down and your mind is conditioned to think in sentences a few different ways and polish words. But also I found last week, for example, I sent my first 10 chapters off to somebody to read, and some of those chapters I wrote them, and I thought they are utterly abysmal. That is so rubbish. So rubbish. And then I went back the next day, because you can be really harsh on yourself in the moment, and nobody can be a worse critic than yourself, and you have to kind of stop that negative self-talk. And I read it, I opened up and I read the file the next day, and I thought, oh, it's like a little present to myself. Oh, that's actually quite good. I've really got to the essence of something here. I could use a different word, or I can say it a different way here. And sorry, child coming in, lunch. Someone in search of a toasted sandwich. No. So that sorry, what was I saying before the toasted sandwich question?
As you said that, I lost it as well.
So I think that present, the polishing of the work comes in the rewriting, but if you can't edit something you don't have. So I think the word count is a useful approach, but I think make it realistic. You know, sometimes you can write a lot more early on, sometimes you can write a lot more later on. Also know the times of day that are most productive for you, I think. I mean, some people sit down in the morning, but they'll just stuff around and write emails, but it's hard to get a good line of writing if you are sending emails and internet shopping and doing all the things, filling out school admin forms. You really need to give yourself a chunk of time, an hour or 40 minutes, whatever it is, to get some words down. And it can just be, you know, I know people who've started writing their first novel on the tram to work, and that's all the time they've got in the day, and they have pulled out absolute knock out of the park novels. So I think but I think the point was that they had a moment in time every day that they wrote to it, they wrote an amount, and then because they wrote it, they could rewrite it, and that made it better.
Absolutely.
There's another question here I missed. Will you write about Gertie's story?
Coming back to that one, will you write about Gertie's story? That one's from Jenny.
Oh, I have been asked about that, Jenny, a couple of times, but I don't know. I mean, that would be an interesting book, wouldn't it? I wonder how I'd wrap it in.
I think I'd like to read it. I know I've seen some insights now into Gertie and her life that I'd like to know what that means to her. I think that's probably the essence of it. It's like, we know, I don't want to give anything away, but
no spoilers.
Yeah, we know how important it was. Did she value that at that time? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's, I don't know.
That's a good idea. Maybe I should just pitch. I already know the characters.
Maybe. You know, if they're talking to you. So Jenny's, actually, she said she'd like to read it, and her granddaughter's story as well.
Oh,
so Bella. Is that Bella?
Yeah, that would be funny. Bella's story would be funny. She's a funny person, I think. So that would be fun.
Absolutely. Now, Jenny's also said, when did you know you wanted to write fiction?
I think I always wanted to be honest. I loved writing at school. It wasn't until I turned 40 that I did a course in fiction writing. I think I worked as a book publisher for a long time, and the funny thing happens when you work in publishing is I became quite, I guess I didn't have the confidence that I would, my work would be the caliber of other writers and other voices, and you see the process up close, and you see the number of edits and rewriting that it takes, and I just didn't know if I had the chops for it. But you know, funny thing happens in middle age, and you care less about kind of expectations, and so I just thought I'd give it a go, and I was fortunate that the first manuscript I pitched, that went to auction, and they asked me for a second book. All the publishers asked me if I had another book, and I'd just been on holidays to Shanghai, actually. And so on Good Friday, I remember this, I sat down and I wrote a proposal for the Jade Lily, and I whipped it off to my publishers, and they said, yep, we'll buy that too. And then I read that proposal the night before I submitted my manuscript, because I thought, oh, have I written the book that they asked for? I don't know. You better check what I pitched. And it was pretty much down to the wire. It was exactly as I pitched it. So I kind of carried that book in my head. And likewise for the Lost Jewels, it changed a bit. Lost Jewels was a more technical book. Certainly every time I write, I want to write a different kind of book and set myself kind of new technical challenges. There's another one again in the book coming. So, you know, that's the fun of being a writer. I think my husband says to me, why don't you do a series? You could save yourself all this agony of all this research and the rewriting. You're just creating everything from scratch every time. Maybe I will, but that is the joy of my work at the moment. That is the bit I love, writing about forgotten pockets of history. So yeah.
Absolutely. Can you give us a bit of a cheeky insight into the themes of the next book?
Well, I can't give too much away. It starts in the Riviera just before World War II, and it is a World War II book. So it kind of, it's the story of a great woman, based on a true story again, a great woman who worked in France, Paris, and got caught in Paris. And it's her story. It goes from the Riviera to Germany. And it is in multiple time frames. And it's a little bit fun too. It's a little bit glam because it's in that pre-World War II era. So yeah, it's a Riviera. So it's like French wine, rosé, good food. So unfortunately, I don't get to go there, research that for this one. So I'm just sampling the rosé and olives here.
I was going to say, you're making me hungry.
Yeah.
Now, does anyone else have any questions for Kirsty? See if anything's coming through there. I will point out at this point that Kirsty's books, including the Jade Lily, are available at the moment through Frankston City Libraries on ebook and e-audiobook across our RB Digital, BorrowBox and Cloud Library apps. So they're free with your Frankston City Libraries membership. If you don't have a membership, you can join up on our website straight away. There's no delays there. And you can also purchase Kirsty's books thanks to Robertson's books. And we'll pop a link to their website when we share this video across our socials on YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. Now, Adele has said, I loved the Midsummer Garden, but wonder why Artemisia's, have I got that right?
Yes, Artemisia's
destiny was so sad.
Look, I don't want to give too many spoilers away in case people haven't read it, but I'm often asked that. I'm often asked that question. I think a lot of people's hearts were broken. Do you know that scene in the book was the first scene that came to me for that whole book? I was on holidays in France and I walked up these old stairs in a turret to this tiny room at the top of a turret, a bedroom just off the turret that overlooked a walled garden and orchard, herb garden and orchard that was all tumbled down and ruined. And I started asking myself who lived there, and I had images of a young chef and cook that would have lived in that room. And then there was the window, and anyway, I just had this dreadful image that I was in this chateau in France, and that became Artemisia's Garden, which became the Midsummer Garden. My manuscript is called Artemisia's Garden, and so that was actually the starting point, which is quite funny for my book.
Now, Virginia has just asked about your publishing experience again, but she was wondering if your manuscript was picked up straight away or if you had to shop around. So maybe you could explain that auction process that you were talking about.
Oh, okay. So I did an online writing course, and at the end of it, I had to submit 3,000 words to a publisher, but it was offshore. It was Penguin Random House, and it was just that wasn't to publish it. It was just they were just giving you feedback at the end of the course of your writing style, really. And I think now in Australia there are very good courses you can do. Australian Writers Centre and Alan and Unwin runs a great one. Curtis Brown, lots of people do writing courses now that you can take your pick. So I wrote 3,000 words, and at the end of it, they said, we have no doubt, you've got a very clear voice. We have no doubt that it will be agented and published. And so I went away and I just had 97,000 more words to write. So I did that, and then I submitted it to my agent, and she really liked it, but she made some suggestions. So I went away and rewrote it, and then she said, I'm going to submit it to a couple of publishers, a few publishers to have a look at. And I don't know whether there was just a quiet month. I don't know. Who knows? But quite a few publishers really liked it, and it went to auction. So it means that they all placed a bid on my manuscript, and then they all asked if I had a second book in me and what that would be. And then after I finished writing the bits, and then obviously I chose from that Alan and Unwin, and they were great. They really have worked with me editorially, and I think kind of the lessons that I've learned from that have really, the finessing have kind of really shown through in my third book, The Lost Jewels, and my fourth book that's coming up, hopefully. And so I think that it was a bit of luck, but having a sharp pitch, a good agent, and just being willing to rewrite. I think people get carried away and send their work in, and me included, send their work in before it's not yet ready. So I think get your work in the best condition you can, because you really only get one shot at a publishing house to read it. It's rare. They might say come back and rewrite, but certainly an agent can give you good advice on that. But you don't have to take it also. I mean, it's your work, but I certainly love the feedback, because by the time I'm finished writing manuscript, I'm pretty much done with it. It's like, oh, don't let you read it again. But so I kind of value those extra eyes that come over it. But nobody's been prescriptive with my writing at all. Nobody's ever asked me to make any changes or do anything. They've just merely given suggestions. So I think that's the best kind of relationship to have with your people that you work with, your agent and your publishers.
I think that's something that's come through strongly in my experience at Frankston City Libraries in talking to a lot of authors is their relationship with their editor. And the experience they gained in the first novel, and I guess being exposed to what actually happens when you publish a novel, and then the second time being a lot more at ease heading into the process and basically giving them a draft that you may not be 100% happy with, but you know that you're about to have a two-way relationship with that to make it the best that it can possibly be.
It's very I find that one of the most fulfilling parts of the writing when I've just sent the first 10 chapters off to my publisher, and I can't wait to hear what she says. I mean, I'm checking my emails every it's like when you're waiting for that boy to call for the first time, but it's more it's like I keep looking and I keep waiting for the feedback, but hopefully it will be there. I don't know if she's watching. Maybe she is. Please send it me. So I think that is amazing. I also have a few early readers that I work with, quite discerning readers, and I think it's good to have great readers around you who are not necessarily, I mean, these people are my friends or have become my friends, but they don't necessarily have to be your friends, and it's quite helpful if they're not, because I think and when I get feedback from readers, they'll often tell you how they think something should be done or how a character should be done, and I don't necessarily take those directives, but what I do take from it is, okay, that character's not working, she's not strong enough, she's coming across as sullen rather than sympathetic, or those little things. If they're trying to tell you how to fix it, they're telling you that there's something not quite wrong, something not quite right, the way she speaks or her dialogue or her mannerisms. I'm not feeling the empathy. So it kind of is just a trigger for me to try writing it a different way. And so I take that, I listen very carefully to those early readers, because and I sent my latest manuscript off to one of my first readers the other day, and she always tells me I have too much cinnamon in my books. So it's like a nervous tick. Which is like ridiculous. Apparently I've got like 1 million in all my books. I've set in so many different countries. Apparently I managed to find cinnamon everywhere. You probably start looking for it now if you've read all my books.
I remember it. It was only a couple of chapters ago. It was the Essie was making dinner. Well, supper. And she was making a tea for her mother.
And she put a bit of cinnamon in.
There was cinnamon in there. Well, maybe cardamom, I think.
Yeah.
So
very funny. She just said, this book is feeling really sharp. You're feeling very accomplished, and your early character, especially your contemporary character, is really feeling very real to me. And so that was lovely. Just got to get the middle. Find out what happens.
What a detail.
There's a bit of a jump. There's a bit of a leap I've done, and I'm just I went for a big walk this morning, a 10-kilometer walk, and said, how can I get this person here, like logistically? So, but that's the magic of writing. And I actually came up with another brilliant idea. I realized that I was missing something. I'm missing a central character, and I came up with that person this morning. So it's pretty wonderful when that happens. I think sometimes you can sit down and plan, but your brain works in remarkable ways. I think it works like it does in life. You have a problem and it just kind of brews away until it can come up with a solution. And that's what writing is. It's a little bit of magic and a little bit of problem solving and a lot of grind, 90% grind, just sitting down, punching out those words. And I'm saying this to myself because that's what I'm going to do. It's a grind, Kirsty. Go and write the words.
Deadline.
So,
Deadline.
you know, last night I sat up for a couple of hours because the kids were all doing their homework, and I should say 2 of my kids are in senior years. So I like to stay awake at the moment just while they are. So I was just sitting at my desk working away. I wanted to go to bed actually, but that was test running, so I felt bad. I felt bad if I knocked off before they did. They're only 16, but I'm a bit older. So I just so I was sitting away, and I was going over my ending, and I was like, oh, that's lovely, and oh, I like that, and oh, that's a bit weird. When did I put that in there? And I sort of made new notes to myself to come back and try new things today. So that was it can be quite productive. And I think, you know, when I was on my walk this morning, I came up with something. So, you know, something happened between last night and this morning without me. Yeah.
That's what you want. I think sometimes it's also getting out of your usual space. So physically going for a walk or just changing it up a little bit.
And it can be, you know, I think every author, you know, I have a massive reading pile at the moment, and I can show you what I'm reading actually. I went to the bookshop, so I'll just talk you through quickly what I've got and why I'm reading them. If you want to, if you're interested. Do we have time, or does everyone have time?
Oh, we've got time.
I know I'm doing Marion Keyes. I'm reading because she's funny.
Yeah, that's on my reading
funny. And it's just really, I mean, I think saying it's light does it a disservice, because it is such a feat, such an accomplishment to write with the airiness that she does, and the humor and approach dark topics. So she's wonderful. I've got this. I am reading, next up will be The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, because I've heard good things about this book, and I just think she's a wonderful, wonderful writer. So that will be my next one. And then the one after that will be this book by my friend Lisa Island. She's we catch up regularly. We've been catching up via Zoom for champagne and just support, because her book has just been released. I don't know whether you are.
We're talking to her next week.
Oh, are you?
Yeah. So
well, tune in for Lisa. She's just she's a wonderful person and a wonderful writer. And so we talk. We'll often text each other and say, writing now, and we'll get online and we'll write 500 words, and we'll say, how many did you write? How many did you write? And so,
perfect.
So that is kind of a lovely collegiate thing about Australian women writers in Australia. Reading a bit of Margaret Atwood. I've read this book before, The Blind Assassin, but I mean, it's Margaret Atwood. You can't go wrong. I'm writing a new novel, and I just find sometimes reading a classic again is just like reading something that's very good for you. It's like a green smoothie, reading something like this. Just tops up the brain with the good stuff.
More enjoyable.
Pardon?
Probably more enjoyable.
Green smoothie for the brain. You get your good vitamins into you, get your good words into you. The Wife and the Widow, I bought. I love a good crime novel. I think I probably want to be a crime novel writer when I'm, you know, well, my next book has a bit of crime in it. Don't tell anyone.
I actually loved The Wife and the Widow.
Oh, I haven't read this, obviously.
Love it.
But I thought his debut was just wonderfully unique and fresh and wonderful and a bit American Gothic. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to this. This Rules for Perfect Murders. No idea what this is about, actually. I just bought it because I love the title, and I really love Anthony Horowitz, who gave the quote. So that's what a sucker I am for the cover and the quote. Know nothing about this book. Great title. I want to write a murder mystery one day, so I thought good to read kind of in the genre that you're writing. And I started reading The Lilac Girls, but I left it in the rain, so I have to wait for it to dry. It's just drying a bit, and I'll get back to that. But it's quite lovely, quite a lovely story as well. So that's my reading pile at the moment.
It looks like a pretty good reading pile. And I have to say, Jenny has mentioned reading as well. She said, if you need me to read for you, I'd love to.
Oh,
Have another offer there.
that's lovely.
Excellent. And she's also said that she thinks she's found her new favorite author.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you very much. That's I'm disappointed that I haven't got to go on tour with this book, because I think one of the loveliest things about being a writer is when we're naturally, that's probably the other reason I'm quite relaxed, is because, I'm good at social isolating. I do it like a boss most days. My routine hasn't changed. It's just everyone else that's now in my family, in my routine all day, every day. But, my walk and my writing and my emails, and I'm pretty solitary a lot of the time. I think you'll find most writers are. But it's a wonderful time where you get to go and meet your readers, and for you to tune in to a Zoom thing is really, it means the world, actually. And it means the world when you get feedback and people ask you questions like this, because you really are writing into an open space. You don't know, you've got a few readers that are around you and your publisher, but you don't know the effect of your work until it goes out into the world. And it's the readers that bring their own life to the characters and their own reading. And I've been very touched with the Lust Jewels, because a lot of people have checked in with me, which is lovely to see that I'm doing okay. I think sometimes people conflate fiction with the author, and which is lovely, both touching and that it has touched a chord with people in that way. And they share, people share their own stories of things, the good, the delightful, and the magical. I've had lots of stories about heirloom jewellery. I've had lots of stories of amazing grandmothers and great grandmothers. I think there are a lot of people out there that could write stories based on their family history. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, the stuff that people send to me. And people just write to say thank you and how touched and moved they were by the book. And when somebody takes, a few minutes from their day to reach out and write and to say thank you or to pass comment on it, it's really one of the greatest honours. And when somebody comes to a literary talk or to a Zoom thing, so thank you very much for having me and for turning up, because it really is, that engagement is just so meaningful and makes it all worthwhile, really. It's what you think about when you're and I certainly have my readers in mind now, because I feel like through things like this, you have a sense of the things they ask and the things they're looking for. And I am often asked, I don't think men are ever asked this question, but in interviews I've been asked a few times about my strong women that I write. And my answer to that is always, I'm surrounded by them. These are the women that I see in my lives. These are the women that are reading my books. These are the women that are writing back to me. They are strong women are everywhere. And what do you mean by a strong woman? And it's like anyone. Like Essie is an extraordinary strong woman, but she is a very underprivileged, voiceless woman. So, and there are still many, many women in that position today. So, who are, very heroic for me. So I think to honour them in literature is important.
Absolutely. Now, Virginia's also commented, I'm another new aficionada. I have loved meeting the authors via Zoom or at the library. Through these talks, I've been introduced to writers and their books that I may not have picked up otherwise. I'll be ordering Kirsty's work.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. That's a lovely thing to hear.
I must say, I often say it's the best part of my job is meeting the authors. And again, as you've said, Virginia, reading books that I wouldn't normally pick up. So I have thoroughly enjoyed, get it up there again, thoroughly enjoyed The Lost Jewels. I was hoping to finish it by today, but the 5-year-old didn't allow that to happen last night. So I will be getting back on this. Okay, do you want that?
Yes, thank you.
Don't mind us.
Yeah, don't mind me. I'm trying to work out how to take a photo.
Got it.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I'm
New
thoroughly
world we
enjoying
live in.
it. I'm about halfway through it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it all evolves for Kate and what she learns. I'm guessing there's a bit of a learn about yourself in it as well, possibly. But yes, now we do have to finish up. So thank you so much, Kirsty, for joining us today, and for everybody that's joined us on this Zoom
Thank you.
for talk.
It's been a real honour. Thank you very much.